here today to show you how to successfully install your kit without any hassles or expensive mistakes. I'll be using the left-hand headlamp assembly from this 1992 coupe as our example. Make sure your headlamps are in the closed position. If they aren't moving on their own, you can spin the black knob on the top of the headlamp motor to close it manually. Next, take your pick and pull back the locking tab on the headlamp plug in order to separate the connector. Again, using your pick, undo the fuse cap next to the headlight plug. Once it is apart, remove the fuse it was covering. Set this fuse aside as we will replace it later. Tools required for this job are a small screwdriver or pick, a T30 Torx driver, a 10mm socket with extension, a 1/4" socket, a 1/4" ratchet, a steel punch, a small hammer, one headlight repair kit, 2 disher face towels, one of which you'll lay it on your workbench now, white grease, and not pictured is a stiff bristled brush. Using your 10mm socket, remove the 3 nuts around the inboard side of the headlamp frame. Next, remove the 3 nuts around the outboard side of the headlamp frame. As you undo the last 2, be careful, as the lamp can fall out of the hood and be damaged. Now that you have the assembly removed from the car, place it on the towel you laid out earlier. Take the second towel and lay it over the painted surface of the headlamp to prevent scratching it while you work. Using the punch, knock out the rolled pin in the aluminum block. Make sure to keep track of it, as you will need it later. We will next be removing the torque screws that hold the motor assembly to the headlight frame. Using the T30 Torx, remove the bolt at the top of the assembly. Next, turn the knob on the top of the motor to rotate the aluminum block enough to allow access to the rear Torx bolt. Remove it as well. Doing this will give you enough slack in the motor mount to access the Torx bolt at the bottom of the motor. Remove the 3 Torx bolts on the motor itself. You are now ready to remove the motor from the headlamp assembly. Pay particular attention to the position of the stamped steel arm, as we will need to reinstall it in the same position later. You may need to use your pick to pry gently between the motor and the aluminum block to pop them apart. Using the 1/4-inch socket, remove the 3 screws in the cover of the motor. Remove the cover from the motor. Be careful to gently remove the gasket, as we will be reusing it. If it is torn or missing altogether, we will use a bit of silicone to seal the unit upon reassembly. Remove the gear drive assembly from the motor. Pay particular attention to the shims, if any, on both sides of the gear assembly, as they will have to go back on just as they came off. Standing over a garbage can, grasp the steel shaft on the gear mechanism and pull the plastic gear off of it. It may require a couple of taps from the small hammer. There will probably be a lot of dust and debris that falls out. This is what's left of your old pellets. Slide the pick through the small hole on the metal carrier and see if the shaft rotates in the assembly. It should not. If it does, contact us. This part is not reproduced and is only available used. At this point in the process, take the stiff bristle brush and make sure to clean out all the dust and debris from the cover, the motor housing itself, and the stuff that's stuck in between the inside supports of the plastic gear. Carefully inspect the gear itself for damaged teeth and for cracks in the body of the gear. If there is damage, you will need to replace the plastic gear. Contact us if this should be the case. At this point, place the 3 new pellets into the gear. Carefully mate up the carrier assembly and press together. We are now ready to begin reassembly, the first step of which is to lightly coat the plastic gear with some bearing grease. Press the gear mechanism back into the motor housing, making sure any shims or washers are in their original position. Replace the gasket and cover on the motor. Replace the 3 1/4-inch screws. Press the motor drive shaft back into the aluminum block, making sure the stamped steel arm we discussed earlier is in its original position. Using the punch, drive the roll pin back into the aluminum block to lock the drive shaft in place. Reinstall the 3 Torx T30 bolts that hold the motor to the frame. Reinstall the 2 Torx bolts at the bottom and the top of the frame assembly. The assembly is now ready to reinstall in the hood. Using your 10mm socket, replace the 7 nuts that secure the headlight assembly in place. Reinstall the underhood lamp fuse that we removed earlier. Once it's back in its place, snap the cap back onto it. Plug the headlight back in. Test the headlight assembly in the car. Assuming everything goes smoothly, this should be all you have to do. If you have any questions or problems above and beyond what we have covered here, please call C&S Corvettes at 800-886-5064. We will be happy to help you however we can.